Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. This is Joseph Shapiro with Sarah Price, and we are really happy to have our guest Amanda Curley here with us. We're going to talk about land use considerations for psychedelics, which I think are right now on a state level the most important consideration you can have when you're trying to open a business, or if you're working on any type of regulated legislation, and you have the opportunity to have those land use issues addressed. Again, Joseph Shapiro, co-founder of Psychedelic League with Sarah Price. Pass it off to you, Sarah.
Yeah, super excited. We've had quite a few conversations that have always kind of come back to, oh, but there's this land use piece, even with a couple of individuals who are interested in starting a business. So Amanda, I'd love to learn a little bit more about your background. I know you've been in this space for quite a long time. So please share with us like where you're coming to us from.
Hi, so my name is Amanda Curley. I'm a counsel at Day Pitney in Parsippany. I am a land use attorney, and I have been practicing in land use for about 12 years now. My bread and butter are approvals for multifamily and like warehouses, think like Amazons, but also in the last, 5 years since the legalization of cannabis, I've been very active in helping cannabis companies receive land use entitlements, appearing before planning and zoning boards to do fit outs for manufacturing, cultivation, and more primarily dispensaries. I think I have now up to 10 or 11 approvals for those types of uses all over the state of New Jersey. I've gone all the way down to Gloucester County and then all the way up to Sussex County. I've seen multiple types of towns, boards, uses, and opinions on cannabis specifically, and that is been kind of also a passion project of mine because I am very interested in the legalization of cannabis, which I'm very thrilled that New Jersey has legalized. And now I'm getting into this space because I also find it equally rewarding to everyone involved. And I think that's about it.
That's great. Thank you for that. Yeah, this conversation is super relevant to New Jersey, which is where Amanda and I are at the moment speaking from, and we practice, but it's also relevant to every other state. So we're going to be talking a lot about New Jersey because we have a pending psilocybin bill. Unfortunately, the bill itself isn't suitable for a real good acronym. We had a meeting of the New Jersey State Bar Association yesterday, the Cannabis and now Cannabis and Psychedelics Law Committee, and everybody was throwing out different names, but maybe BASA, it's the Psilocybin Behavioral Health Access and Services Act. I really can't. If you both have an idea of how to say that in an acronym, please have at it. But yeah, it's a BASA. But anyway, we'll talk specifically about some of the land use considerations that are in there. But also Colorado, where Sarah is, this land use issue is becoming like a very hot topic. It's actually becoming an issue right now because the regulations have been rolling out under that psychedelics, state-regulated psychedelic program, and now the rubber is hitting the road with approaching towns and getting zoning done. And you're already seeing articles coming out about the issues that applicants are facing. And we know, Amanda, that applicants face issues in New Jersey, and so you're seeing it happen the same way in Colorado, and it's already kind of been happened in Oregon, where Oregon did have opt-out provisions for their psychedelics legislation, and so if you look at a map, more than half of Oregon is opted out, and then the remaining green part of that map, there are the same land use issues. So let's see, like where to begin. So
I can quickly say that in the state of New Jersey, I will say land use regulations are actually probably among the strictest in the country. New Jersey is very, very regulated. I've had clients in other states be shocked at the hoops that they've had to go through in order to get a very simple interior fit out approval. In New Jersey, we have the municipal land use law, and that allows municipalities the power to zone. So they are allowed to set the standards, the districts, what uses they want, what uses they don't want. So even with an opt-in or opt-out situation, if they don't want to put it in the ordinance, they do not have to. So that is really important thing to know, because a lot of towns here in New Jersey, even if you have a completely fully conforming use that's permitted going into a permitted space, they may still make you go for a site plan approval, which is a process. I would say a site plan approval could be anywhere from 3 months to years. And if it's litigated, even more years. And with these types of uses, the risk of litigation, I think, is pretty high. If you have a neighbor, for example, who doesn't want you to build a psychedelics facility next to them, they could always sue you against the approval. So I think it's really important to know that New Jersey is a hard state when it comes to these types of activities, and that we are pretty regulated with respect to the use of land.
What would be the basis for a suit from a neighbor, like assuming that, like with cannabis, it's legal? That's not a claim in a lawsuit wouldn't be it's federally illegal, right? I'm sure that's been made. I'm sure somebody who's
no, that's not. It's going to be on the board's decision to grant.
Yeah. So the lawsuit what would be the form of the lawsuit that you're talking about that might happen?
So say you are going for a municipal board because we'll just do a hypothetical. It becomes legal. Towns are zoning for it or not zoning for it. A town is allowing it. It's a conditional use. So in land use law, you have permitted uses, which means they are quote unquote as of right uses. You're allowed to do them. And generally boards, if you're going with a fully conforming application with not seeking any relief as to the use or to parking or to any bulk deficiencies with the building you're in, boards are legally required to approve them. Does that always happen? No. Boards can deny something, and I'm not saying it's right, but then there's a suit. So in this spectrum, you have a permitted use, a conditional use. I would be shocked if towns do not make it a conditional use, because there's more power over conditional uses, because conditional uses, they're permitted uses as long as you meet certain conditions. So in the cannabis space, you see it a lot as a conditional use. So meaning you're allowed cannabis use as long as you have a security plan, you testify as to hours of operations, you bring in a professional, you have certain setback requirements, and they kind of list the items that you need to successfully meet for it to be a conditional use. And then there's prohibited uses. And if you have a prohibited use, you're never going to win that. So say you go for a board for conditional use, and say you need a variance because you're 2 parking spaces short. That is, they could sue. They could say the board was arbitrary, capricious, and unreasonable in determining that the use should be there, that they didn't meet the conditional use standards. There doesn't have to be a huge reason. It could also be, they could say that your notice was defective. Anytime you do a planning board hearing, you have to give notice to everyone around you within 200 feet, which brings out the neighbors. So I'm not saying that the litigation that they file will be successful. Typically, in most instances, objectors aren't successful, but it has a great effect of delaying you being able to get those building permits, you being able to actually do your use. So the first step to all of this is that the town's going to have to decide how they're going to characterize your use. So permitted use or conditional use. Permitted uses are better. They're stronger. Conditional uses are generally what the towns favor just because there's more control.
So do you mind, this is an interesting kind of division, because Joe, this is his space, and I am coming as somebody who's not in the legal space at all, and not really very familiar with this process within a town. Do you mind taking us through what this process looks like of applying, or I'm going to assume I'm using the right word by saying applying.
Yep.
But working through this process, if we have somebody who's listening who is looking at starting a business, where do they need to start, and what is their first step, and then where do they go?
So totally aside from what we're going to speak about later about contacting your city officials and how to kind of get the ball rolling to that, the first step in anytime you want to become a tenant in any building, anytime you want to make a building improvements to it, is you file for a zoning permit. So each municipality in the state is going to have a zoning officer, and it's their duty to enforce the code, enforce their zoning ordinance. So almost all these municipalities, when you want to occupy or outfit a space, you have to apply for a zoning permit. They will look at your zoning permit and they'll tell you whether they can give you a zoning permit because you don't rise the level of improvements to require site plan approval. They can tell you you need a site plan approval, and they can tell you what variances you require. And so the zoning officer is kind of like the gatekeeper. They're going to tell you where you got to go. And it's a one-page application. It's usually a nominal fee, somewhere between $50 and $200. You have to give them a survey, which you should have on hand if you're leasing a building or buying a building. And then from there, the zoning officer will tell you where to go. You could also just look at the code. So I would love to tell you the trigger for a site plan approval. Unfortunately, it is different in every municipality in the state. Each municipality has their own zoning ordinance where they have a trigger. So somewhere like Jersey City, more urban, more sophisticated, they have a really high threshold to get you to come in for a site plan approval, because if not, they wouldn't be able to have all the businesses they have within the city function, because they'd be spending all their time doing like fit out applications before a board, which to them, that's not necessary. They don't want to see you if you're just doing an interior fit out of a space. Then you have other small suburban municipalities that would like to see everything you do to that building. You take down a tree, you have to be there. That's most municipalities, but you want to put up a sign, you have to go. You want to expand by 500 square feet, that's a trigger. So it's really important to know your municipality and to read the zoning code. And even a layperson could read, and you can see which municipalities are going to be a little harder than others, just based on their definitions and just based on their threshold for site plan approval. If ultimately you have to do a site plan approval, that is a process, and that is an expensive process. If you are a corporation, an LLC, a partnership, you have to be represented by counsel. You cannot make the application yourself. You're going to need to have a survey. There's going to be specifics that they want on that survey per their checklist. You're going to need a site plan that's going to have to be prepared by a licensed engineer in the state of New Jersey. It's going to have documents and requirements in there that they have to put on it. You're probably going to need floor plans showing what you're going to propose. I'm assuming in this space, it's going to be very similar to cannabis, where you're going to have some sort of security plan to show them that you can be secure and safe. Some towns require traffic statements. Some towns require environmental impact statements. Some require fiscal impact statements. So really, again, it depends on your municipality and how strict they are and how much they require. But a site plan, so you have to get all the documentation, which, as you can tell, it's a lot. Then you have to submit. They have 45 days to deem you complete. And if they tell you you're not complete, that clock restarts. And then they have anywhere between 95 and 180 days to render a decision on your application. So all in all, we're talking months.
This is interesting because there's a lot of the things that you're commenting on that, if you look at the state bill, is actually a requirement to for the application for a license. Did you see the same thing with cannabis, where they want to see your floor plan? They want to see how the building's going to look, every single thing about it.
Yes, exactly. So with cannabis, all that stuff has to go to the CRC. You need to have floor plans. You have to have security plan. You have to have, I would say, a much higher level of those things. You need much more detail. For the board level, we tend to kind of give them the Reader's Digest version, because also with these types of facilities, you don't want to tell everyone your security secrets. You don't want to tell them how to access the site. So in a lot of those situations, what we'll do, especially when it comes to security, is we'll contact the police and we'll say, would you rather us come in and do a one-on-one with you, and then you can report back to the board? And a lot of the police will say that the chiefs, they'll be like, yes, we'd much rather that. Because also remember, everything you submit to a governmental entity in New Jersey, like a municipality, it's subject to OPRA, the Open Public Records Act, meaning any person can request that documentation.
This is super helpful, because I think, you learn this as you go through. Some of cannabis lawyers have learned this. Like I've never done zoning outside of representation of cannabis clients, and you just it's certainly its own niche. And what we had spoken about before the call, or even our initial call, was not only do you need to know the law, but you need to know the people. The politics are also important. And so perhaps, having these relationships it's going to be what makes or breaks your application. So can you speak more about these relationships and like what you've seen, without divulging anything, but like anecdotal stories about how to have a good relationship with a town to make yourself successful?
Absolutely. Yes. And that's something that we see a lot in the cannabis space. So I will start by saying that the most successful cannabis applicants I've had have hired lobbyists. However, I understand that that is an expensive endeavor and not really ascertainable to everyone. And also, when it comes to the lobbyists, most of the people that I know who had obtained them are multi-state operators who just had deep pockets and relationships with these types of lobbying firms in order to execute. For a normal person who's looking to operate within town, my suggestion is don't leave it up to the town to zone for you, because they might put you somewhere that you don't want to be. They might put you in an industrial zone. They might put you in an unsavory part of town that you do not feel comfortable operating in. They might put you in an area that just isn't conducive to what you're trying to achieve. I'm assuming in this instance, you're trying to achieve calming and more of a retreat, as opposed to being stuck behind like an industrial warehouse in the back of town by like the railroad tracks.
Exactly. So that's such a perfect picture to paint. Yeah, exactly.
That's if that's not what you want, then you shouldn't let them decide for you. So my recommendation for anyone looking to do any types of these uses is do your own due diligence. Look for properties in the areas that you want them. Then read the zoning ordinance. Look at council agendas. Go to council meetings. See what the demeanor of the council is. If you have a hyper specific, more conservative board, they might not be the council for you. You're really going to want to get feelers out there. Go to meetings, present before meetings, see if the council members are open to it or if they immediately brush you off. Go to them with properties that you think are ideal for this use and pitch them, as opposed to just waiting for them to move for you. Because also remember that municipalities generally work at a slower pace than the private industry. And that's because they're inundated and they have tons of applications and they have tons to do. So they're not always looking at the same goal as you. You are one of many goals that they're trying to accomplish with respect to, running their town or their city or their borough. So you have to really be on them. You have to find the locations, review the ordinance, see where you think this use would be appropriate. I know Joe and I talked. I think that this use would be super appropriate and like akin to like near hotels or to medical centers. Both I think are areas that would be great. A lot of towns that have like a hospital in it will have a zone around the hospital where a ton of doctors will operate. Therapists, cardiologists, because all the doctors want to be close to the hospital for when they have maybe procedures or if they ever need the access to the hospital. So I know, for example, I believe Hackensack, I believe Ridgewood, they all have areas outside where they have medical offices. So that might be a place to look. You might want to look out in Western New Jersey and find like retreats or camps or areas that you think would work for if you want more of a retreat style. It's really on you to find the location and then be prepared to pitch. Be prepared to tell them why. Go to them with facts like this will help people struggling with PTSD. This will help veterans. You need to shine the light on it in such a positive way so that the bias that might be out there is easily squashed.
And are you suggesting, or maybe have you seen pitching done even before there was legislation? Like,
yes.
Yeah.
So while the cannabis stuff was pending, I actually had clients that pitched.
Mm-hmm.
Early days.
So it's not a done deal that CREMA was enacted, but it was like it might get enacted. So let's talk about it.
And the most successful applicants were the ones who targeted those towns that opted in and created relationships before they could opt in or opt out. Relationships are really important here. Trust is really important. And the town, city, borough, wherever you go, they want to know that you're reliable and they want to do business with you. That's really important. So yes, start looking now. Start reaching out to council members. Start reaching out to like the planners for the town. Every town's going to have a professional planner. They help do their zoning map. They help create their zoning. They do their master plan. These are all like zoning terms with respect to how you shape land use within any given municipality. Reach out to them.
And that's a great point. I mean, it kind of supports what we've learned. Sarah and I have been learning like along the way. The reason we formed Psychedelic League was exactly what you just articulated. It was the need to get ahead of these issues. And to that point, we're going to be presenting at the League of Municipalities annual meeting in November. And really, I think because there's hundreds of municipalities in New Jersey alone, let alone elsewhere, do you have any suggestions for ways that like other organizations that might be kind of like the hub of a spoke when it comes to towns and council members? Where else would council members look to get information, whether they can learn about psychedelics? For instance, there's League of Municipalities, and they've, as you recall, circulated draft ordinances related to cannabis early on. Are there other organizations that you can suggest that we and or people watching reach out to like get a wider audience of local leaders?
Off the top of my head, I cannot think of that, but I can say that if you're looking for towns that we think are going to be more friendly towards the use, I would look who opted in for cannabis and who opted out.
Yeah, that gives you a good map. Yeah,
and that list is readily available. I think you can get that now at like a Google search. Generally speaking, if towns opted in for cannabis, that means that they have a working knowledge related to regulated substances, as opposed to towns that opted out. I will tell you, the town I live in opted out, and when they did, their reasons were clearly based on bias and lack of education. And I can tell you, because I was reading the Facebook posts in the group, and the things that neighbors were saying about it were just so blatantly false that it was shocking. So if you're looking for towns that are more friendly, I would certainly look at the opt-in, opt-out. I think the League of Municipalities is a great place for you to have a seminar to kind of, because that's the one place every single year everybody goes. There are no other.
Are you going down there this year?
No, but actually, we have an elected official in my family. They will be going down.
Okay.
So they go. And usually my husband goes, but unfortunately, somebody needs to stay home with our children, and that person is me.
Fortunately, it depends on just how much coffee you have.
I've got a question.
You can also approach the municipalities if you want to. That should be your first step. If you're saying, I want to go to this city or I want to go to this town, I think this is a perfect location. It's kind of on you to educate them. You can email them, you can do presentations, you can talk at public comment. Every single council or committee meeting will have a time for public comment, and you can go up at the end and speak.
That's a great idea. That's such a great suggestion. I think then it just comes down to bandwidth, because again, the number of towns. But I think if you start narrowing them down, let's say we cut it from 250, say, to 275, we can work from there.
Well, also too, I'm assuming that everybody has an idea in their head of what they want their facility, retreat, whatever you want to call it, to look like. So the first step is kind of feeling out, like, where do you want to do you want to be in the woods? Do you want to be in West New Jersey? Do you want to be near a hospital? Do you want it to be more of a medical vibe? First, you have to decide what you want it to look like. Then start looking at properties, see what's attainable, see what works for it. And then from there, you can kind of narrow down what towns you are trying to target. I would not say go from the top of the list, the A's, all the way down to, I don't think we have any Z's in New Jersey, and every single town, and try to pitch them. Because you might end up in a town that, it's not good for you. It's not what you dream of. And you shouldn't be putting in this effort to put a facility that's not going to be what you want it to be. So the first step would probably be to find a realtor or find somebody to help you start looking at spaces and narrowing down what you want it to look like, and approaching city councils. And then before you do anything, before you sign anything, go to the city council, go to the town committee meeting, start your pitching. If immediately they say, no, that will never happen here, then to check that off your list. But my most successful cannabis applicants presented before the boards, the councils, all of them, they had safety numbers, they had financing numbers, they had, impacts. They showed security. They had numbers from other states where it's legal, showing that, it's not a big bad boogeyman, which was all kind of part of the pitch process.
That makes a lot of sense. And luckily, New Jersey isn't the first, so we have some data that we can work. We've had other people come on our LinkedIn Live talks, and they are actively collecting data. They have some. We only have about a year of data from Oregon, right, that we can look at, but it's something to work with. And so luckily, we don't have to. We have some data to work with and present to these towns, which is great. Sarah, I think you had a question.
Well, yeah, I was going to kind of ask, I know that some of the things that we've heard is the importance of like differentiating it from cannabis, because cannabis, of course, does come with some of its own concerns for municipalities, whether we've heard even just from like smell, loitering, and all of these sort of things. Can you think of any, because the psychedelic and psilocybin mushrooms don't have any of these sort of concerns, what kind of concerns do you think municipalities really will speak to them?
The children. What about the children? They're going to walk home from school and they're going to pass your facility.
Interesting.
What if someone ever gets access to it? The children. It's always the children. Even with cannabis. I have had so many hearings where we're talking about the elevations or the facade of the facility. Oh, what about the children? What if they get it? What if they see it? Per the CRC, you cannot have any active product available to anybody. You have to have frosted glass or opaque glass. You cannot have it so you can look into a facility. And I remember I had one, it was a dispensary next to a liquor store. And we're like, well, you can walk outside and they can see all the ads on the liquor store and no one's screaming about the children. Like, that's much more insidious than this completely beautiful facade where you can't see anything into. But the children seem to be the number one thing. And hey, listen, I have kids. I love kids. But do I think my kids are going to be impacted if you have a psychedelics retreat and they walk past it? No, I don't think they're going to be impacted. I don't think they're going to know what it is. I'm going to assume that in the signage, there's probably going to be some regulations as to how you can properly sign for these types of uses. For example, in cannabis, you can't have anything that a kid would find to be attractive. So I was doing a cannabis dispensary and they wanted to put a big wizard on the sign. Couldn't do that.
Sounds cool, but you can't do it.
Yeah.
Couldn't do that. So
New Jersey still has them.
Yeah.
But typically the things that they're going to, I hate to say it, but sometimes within the drug space, some people just find the use to be unsavory and they just find it to be intolerable. And they won't give you a real excuse because they know if they say that, it doesn't look good. So they'll find any other excuse to say they don't like it. So security, they're probably going to come up. Like, what if someone gets access to the facility and steals? The children are definitely going to be brought up. And then just the types of people you're bringing into town. That has been a big one with cannabis. A very clear bias and a very clear misunderstanding of all these types of uses.
It's interesting because I feel like from a mushroom standpoint, mushrooms and cannabis are so dramatically different. It's more of like a very, very periodic, if it's periodic at all. It's not kind of, it's not like you're going to have people lining up every morning to come and pick it up because, it's coming up on the weekend and they want to enjoy themselves. There's such a different vibe to it. I'm hoping that, as we speak and present at the League of Municipalities, that we can really relay that whatever your feelings are on cannabis and what the scene is, this is still not that scene. And not to, speak badly about that scene, but if whatever your thoughts are, this is not that.
Well, I could see a board member saying, well, a bunch of drug addicts are coming here every week then, because they don't have and you're speaking of a place of understanding of the use. I'm going to say that a lot of people do not know a lot about the use. So they're going to equate it with druggies, with drug addicts, not understanding that it's really medicinal. It's meant for a totally different use, to cleanse, to clarify, to enlighten. It's not meant to be used frequently. It is kind of meant to be used in a very safe space, which is what you're providing for clients. But that is not something that your everyday council member may know.
It's very
I think
true.
that's a big part of our education with League of Municipalities, is really shifting that perspective and that misunderstanding.
And that's going to be the most important thing for anyone who wants to open up one of these operations to do, is to really educate and pitch and show the overwhelming positives associated with the use, as opposed to the uneducated negative connotations that someone might have just generally across the board for all drugs.
On the concept of the leeway that towns have to regulate within their borders, I'm looking at the legislation now, the psilocybin bill, and just wanted to get your thought on this newly added section. It was as of some time this summer. So the governing body of a county or municipality may adopt by ordinance reasonable regulations on the operation of psilocybin product manufacturers and service centers located within that county or municipality. So pretty catch-all, right? I mean, I don't know if that does that say that what jumps out at you with that, if anything?
Well, I would say from the county level, a county doesn't regulate the use of land. So I think that's probably meant for the county board of health. Perhaps there has to be some sort of application process through the county to permit it. But the county, we do have planning boards at the county level, but the county does not regulate the use of land in municipalities. If you go to a county planning board for approval, it has to relate to either county drainage or frontage on a county highway, or a county road, actually. So county will take out of it. For municipality, they're saying that the municipality can set up the licensing internally as they see fit. And part of that licensing is going to be zoning. They can't have a license process for a use if it's not permitted in any zone, because that wouldn't make any sense. Now, in the cannabis space, what they did do in the beginning was they opened up the application round before they zoned. So they had people putting in applications to be the cannabis before they actually pick the location they were going and put in the location that they wanted to. From that perspective, it was actually kind of beneficial to cannabis uses, because they were able to get the town on board, get them to like them, and then they could kind of help pick the location where they wanted to go. I'm not sure you're going to see the same thing. I'm not sure you're going to see that towns first start an application process and then zone for it, or it's all going to be done at once. And there's kind of no way to guess that.
Yeah. And, reasonable regulations, that part, what is reasonable? I don't know if there's a standard in land use. I guess as long as it doesn't prevent you from operating and shutting down, it's a pretty low bar, right? What reasonable regulations would mean when it comes to operation of, for, let's say, a cannabis business. It seems like it's just, again, the town's discretion, right? Right? There's really no other way around it. Yeah.
So typically, well, I think really when it comes to this, the state's going to be the most heaviest regulator, correct? The state is going to want to know a lot more from you in order for you to get a license to operate. The town then is able to decide what they want. But even with cannabis, like a lot of the times, if you say, well, we comply with CRC, they go, okay, we're not going to ask any more about that, because they understand that if you comply with the state and you have a license from the state, the town can't, if the town opts in and has zoning for it and has an application process for it, and they can't then hold you to a state standard if the state's already said that you meet their standard. Does that make sense?
That's a great point. Yeah, that the Department of Health,
if you have a state,
yeah, right. No, that's a great point.
Exactly. So if the Department of Health says you check this mark, if the Department of Health says, yes, you check this check mark, we think your security plan is perfect, the town later can't say, well, your security plan is not acceptable to us. So keep that in mind as well. So we'll see that in the cannabis space. If the CRC says you're good to go, there's they have superseding jurisdiction. The town can regulate you in other ways. But when it comes to the contents of your application and your licensing, the state will supersede that. The town can get you and other stuff when it comes to.
Yeah, that makes sense. And once we actually have regulations from the DOH, that'll probably make more sense in the context of what we're doing. There's another section, a subsection of the same section 29 of this bill, which says no county or municipality shall be authorized to establish any taxes or fees on the manufacture or sale of psilocybin products or the provision of psilocybin services. So, I mean, that's a big departure from CREMA, right? And
well, that was
go ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
That was kind of like the dangling carrot to get the towns to opt in. So that I do see as a kind of a con here with this bill, just because some towns opted into cannabis for revenue purposes. I have appeared before certain councils that said we would have never opted in, but we really need the revenue.
Now, to this point, it doesn't say, putting our real lawyer's hat on, it doesn't say that no business is authorized to pay a fee, voluntarily. So
that can be something that non-land use people
can work out
with. From a land use perspective, you cannot do quid pro quo. You cannot tell them that you'll buy them something. You cannot do that. That's a very big no-no.
That's a great topic, actually. No, but so on this point, if you came in and said, "Listen,
no land use, you cannot do that."
Would there be a context outside of a land use application process, maybe preceding that process, where you approach a town? Let's say we approach a town and say, "Listen, we want to give 5% of our profits to support your first responders." Is that a quid pro quo? I'm so glad you brought this up, because where are you running afoul? Yeah.
Within land use perspective, yes, you're running afoul. I do not know. I will not answer that, as opposed, like, that is a question that requires research and.
Very interesting. That was a surprise to me, actually.
Nothing I'm saying here is legal advice. As for your specific application,
when you're breaking out the disclaimer, we've hit a nerve for sure.
But no, I've had issues in land use where, like, the town said, "We want you to buy us X," and you're really not. You can't do it. You're not supposed to do it.
I mean, I still feel like there is space, though, for, like, let's say maybe there is some sort of like a negotiated rate or negotiated support for the first responders that maybe are, because of course it's going to have to come from a healthcare professional who are recommended, like the first responders who are supporting this community, we will do everything we can to support them and to make sure that they're fit in and to help them through this process. Like I feel like, is that quid pro quo to say, like, we want to support our community?
We're going to have to research this, because it is very interesting, because now, these are all just hypotheticals, and we're not asking for legal advice. We don't have any clients in play, but it is an interesting idea, because it's an artifact of cannabis, at least in New Jersey. And I've heard towns, I don't know what I'm saying, towns, I can't recall who, but someone has said, yeah, so how much would we get under this bill? What would be paid? And the answer is, like, it looks like nothing, and that person's not the only one who's going to be asking that question up front. Like, so how much do we get paid?
I would also look at the bill, look at the comments, look at what's occurring at meetings, see if it's brought up at all, if the legislator said anything about it.
Well, full disclosure, I'm part of this coalition, the psilocybin bill coalition, which just means that I'm invited to regular Zoom meetings to comment on what they're doing. And they being the lobbyists it's also attended by the Political Action Committee, which is drafting the bill actively. So there is opportunity for this to be raised, and I don't think, to my knowledge, that they've fleshed it out much, worked on that much. But certainly I'm making notes here, because this is something that I didn't realize how much conflict there could be in trying to work around it. You think maybe certain things you can work around outside the legislation. But if the legislation specifically says there can't be any fees, then it sounds like perhaps the workaround is going to be more difficult than you thought.
And that's something you should comment on and say that you should be able to give a maximum percentage or maximum fee or something, because if the concern of municipalities generally is that it might be a stress on first responders, because what if something goes wrong? That's a great tie-in because they're related. There's a rational nexus there between what the money and what you're supporting. So you're supporting first responders because that you think will be the aspect that might, if anything, bear any type of stress from this use. But I honestly cannot say what kind of stress this use would cause, because I do not think you're going to have traffic congestion.
No,
I do not think
we
you're
heard
going
from
to have fire issues. I don't think police is going to be that much of an issue because you're really not going to have people in and out like with a cannabis dispensary.
Well, the bill already requires that each service center has an emergency, like a contract with an emergency service. And if we look back at Oregon, from what I understand of the 35 plus 100 people they've put through in the first year, I don't know. I think we've heard in passing maybe once in the entire state did somebody have to call emergency services. So it's almost like, listen, what is the stress on you guys? Like, if anything, we benefit. And then Joe and I've talked about getting the data when we start looking at how does this benefit mental health? How does this reduce, improve productivity, reduce sick days, reduce, people going out on disability, all these sort of things. Like, we still got to quantify those. But yeah, it's hard to really nail down what is the stressor other than the work to get it set up to start.
Well, that's why I said of all the stressors, the only one that I could really see is emergency services, because the other ones really won't be at play here. Because with land use, there's always your standard qualms or questions. Usually children are one of them. So I'm talking general land use, not cannabis, nothing. Generation of school children and safety of school children usually comes up. Traffic conditions, offsite traffic conditions nearly always comes up. Just the general, we don't want a new building on a vacant piece of land comes up. And then you have the substitute uses. Now, none of those I just said to you would really be impacted here because I don't foresee people putting up a big giant building for this use. I don't see a ton of traffic be generated from this use. You're not generating any school children, and you're not really impacting any school children. So you don't have a lot of the stuff that, like, when we do multifamily or we do affordable housing or when we do warehousing or we do cannabis, those do bring up those kinds of questions. So that is a benefit to you because you're not going to have those stressors. But if you're trying to find what the carrot can be and you're trying to tie it to some sort of contribution, I do think that emergency services is a great link to make. And I also do think that someone in the bill should have some sort of, you can give some sort of contribution because the money does sweeten the pot and it makes the towns much more open because they see that as a hard physical benefit. They are going to receive money. And I understand there are so many benefits to psychedelics, as stated, anxiety, PTSD, but that to them might not be as real.
This is something that's super interesting now. It has me thinking, I'm like, there's a lot of opportunity here to, if the legislation doesn't change, to kind of bridge that gap there. Perhaps there's some way. I think this is a good opportunity, and I don't know what form it could take, but the word grants is coming up. I'm not sure how it could work, but we'll have to have a offline talk to pick your brain more about this because it's such an interesting area. It really just comes down to, like you said, it's the carrot. There's really no stick at all. There's nothing you can do if they don't take you on. But there's a lot of opportunity, as Sarah was saying and alluding to, is that, and we've spoken with it. We had a really great guest come on who is in the insurance space in psychedelics. And so it's like quantifying the positive benefit for employers. And you think about counties and towns, they're large employers. So if you can quantify that benefit, you can say, and especially if there can be scholarships for county and town employees to use the facilities, this could have a quantifiable impact on their, like Sarah said, sick days,
Yes.
I think, and I know this is a little bit, I'm going to bring this part of it in. From an energetic standpoint, that flow to me feels a lot more clean, where like, let us help you. Like this medicine is here to help us, for us to help us. So like, let us help like your employees. Versus here, let's slide you some money under the table. Cause that is always, I mean, that always has like its own yucky feel to it, right? It is what it is, and it's part of how society works in a lot of ways. But yeah, the medicine is kind of bringing in a new way of doing things, and which is interesting. I'm actually pleasantly surprised that this is part of the bill.
Yeah, I wonder what the genesis of it is, especially considering that it's the same legislators who drafted the bill agreement that had that reverse, provision. It's super interesting. This is why we love these talks, because like we think we kind of know land use, but we've learned a ton just in 40 minutes.
I mean, if anything, my takeaway from the legislature not putting it in is that maybe they think that towns will be more open to the use, because again, it's not going to be as widespread. You're not going to have one of these facilities in every single municipality. You're not going to have as many people coming into towns and shopping like at a dispensary. It's going to be a very different type of use. And maybe the legislature knows that. And that's why you're seeing it reflected. The problem is it's going to be on you to teach the municipalities that, and really like make them understand it is medicine. It has benefits. They're quantifiable, and to really teach them so that also, if you teach them, that benefits them, because maybe they won't put you behind the warehouse by the railroad tracks, because they'll understand the use and like understand that is not where you should be, because that's not an appropriate place for you. They might be like, you know what, that old B&B that shut down, that might be a great place for them, because that is much more of what you are probably looking for with respect to a facility than, again, behind a warehouse with no lighting and railroad tracks and just not a nice scenery.
That really is.
Go ahead,
Sarah.
I was just going to say, like, that's what we're really hoping to educate on at the League of Municipalities. We're working with one of the coalition members who came up with a brilliant idea of taking somebody through a walkthrough, like an experiential without the medicine, maybe just with like cacao, but like, a room with like seating on the floor and really nice plants and, some other things that gives you the feel for what it is and why is in this environment and setting important. So we're hoping that we get some really good attendance.
Yeah. Also, I would recommend, like, I've seen a lot of documentaries on the use that it's been super helpful. Have people watch them, have them see what it does for veterans, see what it does for people with severe anxiety and severe PTSD, because it is a huge benefit. But the problem is that not everyone's educated on it. And I will say I'm not nearly as educated on it as Sarah and Joe are, because I'm a land use attorney. And I've watched documentaries, I've read some literature on it, but I think it's really important to educate in this space. And it's important to educate to anything that's new, because people are not, the city council people or the town people, they're not, Googling this on a Tuesday night. But if you provide it to them, they might open the link. If you give it to them and you give them a package and a presentation, and then cite your sources, provide links to the sources, and make it so it's really easily accessible to them, they might on a Tuesday be like, oh, look, I got this from Sarah Price. I'll click on it. And then next thing you know, they're sitting there, they're reading your stuff and they're educating themselves. And maybe a little bias that they might have starts decreasing. Maybe they go, oh, this is not a terrible idea. Oh, maybe I should talk to the mayor about this.
That's really great.
That's exactly what we would hope would be the kind of chain reaction of putting out digestible information, because it's out there, like you said. You can go to Netflix, but if you could, everybody needs an editor these days. You have such a wealth of information. You just need somebody to edit it for you. So that's all that needs to kind of happen. Easier said than done, as we know when you're drafting a long legal brief. It's like the information's there and putting it in the brief and everything. That's the hard part, So
I would recommend everybody who's going to go to any board, prepare a PowerPoint. Ask the boards if you can share it. Ask the council if you can share it. Can I pull up my PowerPoint? Have links. say, can I circulate the PowerPoint to the entire committee or the entire council? Can I print out? Just make it so that it's easy. It's easy for them to say, sorry, it's hard for them to say no. If you're saying, I just want to give you this for educational purposes, no strings attached, give it to them. See how they do. Go to the meeting, speak, see how they respond to you. See the types of questions they ask you. I'm going to bet within 10 minutes, you're going to have a really good sense whether or not this municipality is going to be open to it.
That's so smart. And I mean, you've nailed it, really. That's exactly what we're working towards here, especially as the fall is ramping up and we have the annual conference coming around the corner. We have a really good opportunity to do what you just described. So it's kind of like, it's our opportunity, collectively to lose. So you've nailed it.
And then also make sure you hire professionals that know what they're doing. Now, not for, I understand the initial pitch, but eventually, if you do need a site plan approval, hire a good engineer, hire an attorney that is comfortable and knows about the use and knows what you're trying to portray. Make sure that you have, for whoever's doing your licensing work, make sure they have familiarity with it. Make sure they know about the use. Just don't go down to the guy down the street because his name's there, because that person might not have contacts. That person is going to be shooting in the dark. You want the people who will pick up the phone and do know people. They can talk to commissioners, and you want to really make a name, use
putting your name back up here so people can, as part of this,
make a name for yourself, but make sure that the people that you on your team are also kind of names in the industry, because it makes a huge difference, especially with licensing. If you are trying to get someone to help you with your licensing application, make sure you hire an attorney who knows how to do it. Don't hire the guy who said, well, I kind of have an idea, because let me tell you, I happen to be married to a licensing attorney in a different space, and he could pick up the phone and call a lot of people before anyone else. And it makes it a lot faster of a process when the people on your team are known in the space.
It's so true. And that's true in every area of law. And so why wouldn't it be true in this as well? I actually just got somebody did actually scan the QR code, so I'm putting it back up there. So I just got a notification. So really appreciate you jumping on. This was super interesting. Again, it's really the core of what I think state-regulated psychedelic law is about. We don't have to worry about the FDA or any of that. So this is not relevant. State-regulated psychedelic law is effectively land use, in time, place, manner restrictions. So thank you so much for jumping on.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Amanda. This is awesome. As we learn more about the bill, we would love to have you back on to once it passes, deep dive on this.
And you know what? If I can make it to the league, if I can find, so the part of the reason I can't go to the league is that my babysitter, my mother-in-law, happens to be the elected official. So, but
we'll see if we can help you with I have a 3-year-old actually I'm going to go pick up right now. So we'll see if we can coordinate on that.
Yes. And if I can make it, I would love to come sit in the audience and hear you guys speak.
Amazing.